Welcome to What Are You Sporting About podcast, a podcast about business, employment, sports, and entertainment to help educate, support, and guide you to your next level. Here's your host, attorney Sivonnia DeBarros.
Hi, this is Sivonnia DeBarros with What Are You Sporting About podcast, and I'm your host. Today we have an awesome person with us. We have Malcolm Lemmons, who's also an author, former professional athlete. Welcome to the podcast, Malcolm.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It's a complete pleasure. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, born and raised in Washington, D.C., grew up playing basketball. It was the only thing that I ever saw myself doing in life. So I had this dream of becoming a professional athlete, and I chased that throughout high school, college, and, had an opportunity to pursue that dream. And so I went overseas for 2 years on and off. Really wasn't what I imagined it would be. Went through a lot of ups and downs and obstacles and ended up retiring from the game at 25 years old, not really knowing what I wanted to do next. But fortunately, I had spent that previous year overseas kind of discovering myself, learning about who I was outside of the jersey. And that really kind of gave me the jump start into the transition, even though I struggled. And, long story short, kind of figured my way, through that journey and still kind of going through the career transition and, became an entrepreneur and author. And someone who's really passionate about inspiring other athletes and educating them and getting them to understand the platform that they have during their careers and how they can leverage that more effectively. So just someone who's passionate about giving back to the community and making an impact on my culture.
I absolutely adore that, because one thing that I was thinking about as you were speaking, something that's interesting here is the fact that you and I have both written books to educate professional athletes. So I competed at the D1 level. I never went pro, but there are some skills that you receive that actually translate into the rest of your life if you recognize that and apply it. And so I want you to talk a little bit about the book that you wrote, titled Impact Beyond the Game. Because that book, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be that you're speaking to professional athletes to help them recognize the purpose to create a legacy that they will be proud of, at the end of the day. So talk to us a little bit about your book and what you're hoping athletes get out of that.
Yeah, for sure. So this will be my second published book coming out in July, and I really got the idea to write this book a couple of years ago as I started to see, the emergence of social media and how athletes were using their platforms in various ways and taking advantage of business opportunities and just the amount of options they had outside of sports. And so I began to see this trend, and I became really intrigued as far as personal branding goes and how athletes can leverage their influence. And so I had this idea. I've done a lot of research around different athlete brands. And what I really hope to do with this book is to get athletes to understand, one, that, while you have that jersey on and while people are, while you're playing and while you're still an athlete, people want to be around you. People aspire to be like you. And so athletes essentially can create so many opportunities for themselves when they recognize that the strength of their platform, and two, how they can leverage that platform, what opportunities are out there as far as social media and endorsement deals, or even how you can leverage your platform to set up meetings and have job opportunities for life after sports. So getting athletes to really be keen and cognizant about what their platforms can do in life after sports and how they can create a legacy with it. So the book is just basically a blueprint teaching athletes all these different strategies and tactics for, how they can leverage their brands more effectively and why it's so important for them to do this while they're still playing. And like I said before, it was something that I wish I would have did during my career and something that I see a lot of athletes struggling to do. And I'm just, here to kind of impart that knowledge and show athletes the mistakes that I made and teach them that, when you have this title, it's very important for you to leverage it while you still have the eyes on you and people still care about you.
Mm-hmm. And hindsight is always 2020.
Right.
So, especially for professional athletes, I feel like you guys you already have a brand, right? So people watch you play. They are they wish that they had the opportunity to play a game and get paid for it, like you guys do. But sometimes people don't recognize that they have that. They don't recognize that brand is there, or they don't recognize that they can actually monetize their name, in a way where they can actually start to create some form of wealth that will help to sustain them once they leave the sport. And then also on the back end of their life, like their brand could literally take care of them 10 years, 20 years down the line. So I definitely appreciate the fact that you have taken your story and put it in a format where other people can digest it, understand it, and learn some key lessons that are necessary, whether you're playing or not, right? You said something I want to touch on, though, because you said you retired at 25 and you had no idea what you wanted to do.
Right.
How did that happen?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I was overseas that year before I retired. I was still playing, and I came in the middle of the season, and so we had a big break, and we weren't playing any games. We were just practicing for maybe an hour or two a day. Okay. And so I would come back to my apartment and have nothing but time on my hands. I didn't know the city. I didn't really know my teammates that well. And I just had a computer, and I didn't even have Wi-Fi at the time. So imagine, what was going through my mind. But I just sat there and I thought about my experiences as an athlete. I thought about the obstacles that I went through and how I even got to that point in my life. And that was like really the starting place to where I started to think about how my experiences as an athlete, how can everything that I've been through as an athlete help me going forward in life? Because if I wasn't going to take anything that I learned throughout the past 20 plus years that I had been playing basketball, then all of it essentially was going to go in vain, besides like the memories that I had. And so I just started to write. I started to write because I had time, and it was therapeutic for me. And so that was like really the beginning for me seeing myself as more than just being a basketball player. It's something I see a lot of athletes struggling with because they don't take the time to understand what they're good at and what they like to do because they had this tunnel vision on sports. And so even though I knew I wasn't going to play basketball forever, actually transitioning into something else or doing something else in my life wasn't something that people showed me how to do or emphasize. And so it was still, I would even say till this day, it's still somewhat tough to disassociate myself from being a basketball player, even though I've been retired for 3-4 years now. And I saw how many other athletes struggled with athlete identity and really reframing what that means and getting to see themselves as more than. So that struggle is real, and retiring and trying to figure out your life as an athlete is something that every athlete, I think, struggles with at different levels.
Different stages. Yeah. It's funny you say that because in my book, What Are You Sporting About? I actually talk about, how people may perceive you as this jock. Like that's all you can do. That's all you're worth, and you get in your mind, or some people may have in their mind, like, oh my gosh, I've worked so hard, from Pop Warner all the way up through the collegiate level down to the pros, to a point where this is all I've done. This is all I've focused on. And then sometimes I think it can play a trick on you. So What Are You Sporting About, from my perspective, really ask you to think about what is all of this even for? Right. At the end of the day, if we were to shed that athletic cloak from you, who would you be? Mm-hmm. What will you be passionate about? What purpose would you be pursuing? And so I think those conversations are very important, and especially with our young athletes who are coming up, who are now going to be in a space where they can control their name, image, and likeness, it's going to be very imperative to think about that in the context of their brand, in the context of creating a legacy, so that they have a roadmap where they want to take themselves later in life. So why don't you talk to us a bit about what athletes can do or should be doing to prepare for this whole shift to name, image, and likeness?
I mean, I think it's very simple. I think athletes should start acting on the things that they think they might be passionate about, whether that's writing, cooking, media, whatever the case might be. You have to start actively, pursuing these interests during your athletic career, because if you wait and you focus on your sport, you might have some success, but even if you do go play pro, you're still one day going to have to retire and do something else. And so all those years that you could have been, pursuing this other thing on the side or in your spare time, you weren't. And so it'll be that much harder for athletes to figure that out later in life. So I think athletes have to start doing that early and, understand that it's not so much about transitioning. And I've began to recently kind of reframe my wording around life after sports, and not tell athletes, not speak to athletes and talk about transitioning, because I think that's a hard concept to kind of wrap your mind around, especially during your career. Nobody wants to, think about the end when you feel like you're just getting started.
Right.
And so it's now, to me, when I'm talking to younger athletes and athletes who are still, in their careers, in the middle of their careers, it's about having dual careers. So seeing yourself as an athlete and not thinking about, the end of the road. And so I think when you reframe and preach to athletes, it's about having a dual career, and that none of us are just one thing. We all have different interests and passions and things that we want to do in life. It's about teaching them how they could, play basketball and do this, or play football and be this, and, doing it early and often. I think athletes are starting to get that. We have great role models and examples of professional athletes who have been able to have dual careers. So I think it's a great time for name, image, and likeness, and I'm extremely excited to see what will
I'm so
come
excited
from
too.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. This is a huge opportunity for these young men and women in sports to really be able to leverage their names earlier in their career. Right. And you're right. You can do more than one thing. And this is the time where you can literally be an athletic entrepreneur, period.
Exactly.
Because we already know you need more than one stream of income anyways to survive. So you might as well create the side hustle, monetize it, and let that thing kind of grow its own life and set yourself up. So that's really, really cool. I'm waiting, just like you, to see what these new rules are going to be and how things are going to be implemented for name, image, and likeness. Of course, there's so many questions that are unanswered and so many hypotheticals that we can definitely dive into to talk about all of the parameters. But that's definitely a conversation that these young men and women should be thinking about. And in terms of, like what you said, creating some side hustles, basically, work on things that interest you, where your passion lies. And I always hear people, especially branding folks, talk about athletes doing things that they've been doing forever. So if you say, for instance, you probably go to this one event that caters to, let's say, Paralympics or something, keep doing that. Find something to really make it a part of your brand, because once the sports itself is done, you'll still have that authenticity behind your name, and people will trust who you are because you've been in that space for however long. Right. Do you have any more advice that you can give to any athletes who are currently playing, those who may see their time coming to an end soon? Is there anything that you would like to share with them?
I would say one thing that, when Kobe Bryant was on the back end of his career and he was retiring, one thing that he always said in an interview that really sticks out to me is, what he did on the basketball court was not who he was. And I think that's something that every athlete needs to understand, is that your identity as, an athlete, or this title that people place on you, it's a phase in your life. It's a part of who you are. It's not who you are. And so when you kind of restructure your thinking around that and know that you're much more, it becomes a lot easier to see yourself doing other things in life. So I would definitely push that point across and really, hone in on it and try to get athletes to understand that, that foundational piece of transitioning or, going into life after sports. And I would say that's probably the biggest key, is to really disassociate that athlete title from your name, or, not think that you're only supposed to be this one thing for the entirety of your life, and understand that you're much more and you have more value and things to give to the world. I think is extremely key when you're talking about trying to figure out your life going forward.
Absolutely. That was so deep and so dope, because it's so and it puts me in the mind frame of Michelle Obama, when her book, Becoming, we're always becoming something different. And like you said, just being an athlete is not all that you are. That's not you don't have one side to your life, So that was very deep, and I love it. And I hope people take heed to that. Malcolm, thank you so much for joining me on today's podcast. I look forward to connecting with you and seeing what we can do to continue to educate and support and guide our professional athletes in business. Take care.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us this week on What Are You Sporting About podcast. Make sure to visit our website, prosportlawyer.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your favorite platform is, so you'll never miss a show. And while you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes or iHeartRadio. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. If you like the show, you might want to check out our book, What Are You Sporting About? Attorney Sivonnia DeBarros is available for private consulting at sldebarros.com. And remember, we're here to educate, support, and guide you in your journey to success, because we're all sporting about something.